Please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers. My name is Gillian Riley, and I have the great honor and pleasure of being the president of the Canadian Club of Toronto. Each season, the Canadian Club proudly provides a forum for leaders in every aspect of society to share their thoughts and ideas with us. Through our programs and activities, we offer access to dynamic political, business, and public figures. And of course, today's special guest is a great example. Before I formally introduce the 2017 Lifetime Achievement Award recipient, I just want to tell you about our final event of the season, which is next Tuesday, June 19th. We host an evening event called LGBT on Bay. Our distinguished panel will talk about the importance of being out as we acknowledge Pride Month. To order tickets or to learn more about the club, please visit our website at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO or by using that hashtag. And we really hope you will tweet or post about today's event. I would like to thank our sponsors for their very generous support of today's event. Without our sponsors, these events are not possible. Our sponsors today are Deloitte, represented by Duncan Sinclair, Fairfax Financial, I know Prem Watsa is here, McCarthy Tatro, represented by the Honourable Wayne Wooters, and the University of Waterloo, represented by Dr. William Tatham. Please join me in a round of applause for all of our sponsors. I would also like to acknowledge and welcome our youth and young leaders table from the University of Waterloo. It's very important that we bring our youth to these events, and they really, I don't know if you had a chance to speak to them, they get a lot out of it. So if you could please stand and we can recognize the youth from the University of Waterloo. Thank you for attending. And thank you to Bell Canada for supporting the participation of our young leaders. And now our honored guests. Each year, our club identifies a candidate for its Lifetime Achievement Award. The award celebrates the lifelong efforts and leadership of extraordinary Canadians. We are so proud to bestow the 2017 award to the Right Honourable David Johnston, who served as our country's Governor-General for a 7-year period ending last year. His Excellency served as Canada's 28th head of state with compassion and energy, hallmarks of his leadership style. I think we've already seen that today at this lunch. I think he must have talked to every person in this room. During his term as Governor-General, the Rideau Hall Foundation was established. This registered charity supports the work of Office of the Governor-General. Today, His Excellency serves as chair of the Foundation's Board of Directors. He also has the role of Executive Advisor at Deloitte. Before being installed as Governor-General, the law professor was president of the University of Waterloo for 11 years. He also led the association that represents Canada's colleges and universities. Mr. Johnston has also served in similar capacity for leadership of Quebec's universities. This afternoon's celebratory event is a family affair. Joining His Excellency in conversation is his daughter, Alex Johnston. She too is an accomplished Canadian who serves our nation's broadcaster, CBC, as Vice President, Strategy and Public Affairs. I would also add on a bit of a personal note that I also grew up in Montreal, and she lived in Montreal at the same time as I did, just up the street with her father, and my father is here today. So it is very much a family affair at today's event. I would just remind everyone that members and guests, if you have questions, please complete the Q&A cards that are provided at your tables, and our staff will collect them so that Alex can ask questions of the floor as well to her father. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alex and her father to join us at the Canadian Club podium and to receive the Lifetime Achievement Award, which we will present after the session. I'll come back up. So welcome.
Well. Here we are. As soon as I walked in, I started laughing because all I want to do is make fun of him. So to avoid that, I've actually prepared a bit of a roadmap for the conversation. I thought, so that I would not just tell embarrassing family stories, we would talk about 4 things that are of interest to me and I think will be of interest to the room. Values, institutions and the importance of strong institutions, the country and what the country means to you, and Canada's place in the world. We're going to roll through questions quickly because I want to make sure we do have time for questions from the audience. And the ground rules that I gave to him last night, because he stayed over at my house, are if I get bored or I'm not comfortable with the answers, I have a list of childhood grievances that I thought today would be an appropriate time to address. So he is on his toes. I want to start with values, and I will just say in terms of context, by no means as your children do we think you are a perfect man, but we all say that you are the best person we know. You have been an extraordinary father. You role model great values and you treat everyone with kindness. And my sisters and I typically, when we speak about you, say being your daughter is like winning the lottery. We did nothing to deserve it, and it is the greatest gift. You have been someone who has role modeled very good values for us. Can you talk a bit about what you feel are core values that you have built your life around, and how you instill those values in individuals?
Alors, je veux dire deux choses, premièrement. Premièrement, je veux dire merci au Club canadien pour l'honneur que vous m'avez conféré aujourd'hui. Je suis touché parce que j'ai beaucoup d'admiration pour ce club historique, plus que 150 ans mon service de Canada. Thank you. I'm truly touched and deeply grateful for this honor. The second thing I should say is that I'm absolutely terrified. Behold, you see a man who is overcome by fear. Because when I received this invitation, I thought, isn't that wonderful? I have so much respect for the Canadian Club, and I'll go and we'll have a wonderful time in Toronto, and I'll speak in governor generalities about very mundane things like Canada's the world's longest undefended border for 200 years and the ease of trade relations with our neighbor. John Macdonald's national policy and Wilfrid Laurier's failed Canada-U.S. free trade agreement in 1897. It would be very pleasant. Wayne, all governor generalities, I want you to know. Or it might be major projects like building a modest pipeline, you know, national project like the Canadian Pacific Railway that went through so smoothly. John Macdonald was never defeated. Or Trans-Canada Pipeline in 1954 where C.D. Howe was defeated, etc., all smooth. And then I learned that my number 2 daughter, as she would say, your favorite number 2 daughter, number 2 daughter, is going to cross-examine me. And I remembered all of those suspended allowances because she was too cheeky with the parents, or standing over the piano with the stopwatch, you know, the half hour isn't finished, there's no dessert for dinner, and revenge is going to be had. So I am terrified. Let the games begin.
Let the games begin.
So the first question was values.
Core values.
Well, you've asked me a serious question, so I'll give a serious answer. My moral compass is the Christian faith. And the core of the Christian faith is the concept of love. And the great commandment is love thy God with all thy strength and all thy mind and all thy soul, and love thy neighbor as thyself. Those are the 2 commandments. It's very interesting that Robert Schiller was at a conference that I was attending on economics in the New World, and I thought he would give us his insights into this modern world of acceleration, and he didn't. He spoke about that common theme of love of thy neighbor across all the great religions of the world. And he said, isn't that interesting that that trust concept transcends all the religions? So for me, that has been my anchor. And I say to young people, find a moral compass. It doesn't necessarily have to be religious. It could be secular, but it must be a moral compass. And Alex, I remember we were having dinner with Dr. Joe Nathanson, who was about age 92 at the University Club in Toronto. You were about 13. And this is a man who I think delivered more babies in New York than anybody in the United States. And at the end of the evening, you said, Dr. Nathanson, Dr. Joe, as you called him, would you give me your kind of philosophy of life? He said, yes, the prophet Micah. And that is, seek justice, show mercy, and honor thy God. And to honor thy God, you have to honor yourself or love yourself. but not too much. And that's where I've been so fortunate to have a wife of 54 years and 5 daughters who have been quite determined that their father's hat size would not increase over all those years.
It's very true. It's very true. And there were only 2 rules growing up. You had to go to church on Sunday, which was immensely irritating, but in retrospect now I understand. And you couldn't swear, and if your friend swore, he would quietly walk them home. So that was it. How do you instill those values or core values in kids and people growing up in communities?
Well, I guess you kind of walk the talk and don't talk the talk. When I was installed in this wonderfully privileged office of Governor General 7.5 years ago, the title of my installation address was "A Smart and Caring Nation, a Call to Service." And I said, if you remember only 3 words of what I say today, they are cherish our teachers, cherish our teachers. And if we had a day together, I'd tell you 100 stories of teachers, mentors, coaches, seniors who have influenced my life. And it's interesting who you choose to admire in life. And if I have a value system and if I have a particular philosophy, I think it's come from those people whom I've watched. And so what do I find interesting and admiring about them? And you kind of pick up the habits. And so parenting is the greatest teaching responsibility. And with any luck, you're as lucky as Sharon, my wife, and I are with 5 daughters and now 14 grandchildren. George is right there. And we watch these same values that we admire passing on to second and third generation. So if anyone asked me, what's your greatest achievement in life, I would say just watching my daughters grow and now watching my grandchildren grow.
Well, I'll just say one thing. I remember when you were installed as Governor General, you had something like 10 seats for people you could invite. And I remember the first advice was lots of great Canadians and people with big titles who had done extraordinary things. And in the end, you and Mom selected the 10 people who had been most impactful in all of our lives. And it was a combination of some Canadians you would know and some people from humble origins and humble lives who had touched you very deeply. And I remember looking at that group thinking, that's our life. And you brought people into our life that were good people with good values to role model it with you and Mom.
We probably told you to be useful as well.
Yes, you did. So institutions has been a pretty significant theme in your life. You've devoted your professional life to institutions. In your personal life, you've really committed to your churches. You've been a community builder. Strong institutions matter. And I remember when you took on the very sexy, glamorous task of crafting the Mulrooney-Schreiber Inquiry Terms of Reference. And I called you the day after it was announced, and I said, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is the worst assignment in Canada. And it wasn't as simple as this, but more or less you said, the Prime Minister asked me to do something, and he really asked. And when the Prime Minister asks you to do something, you do it. And I thought that is a perspective that you don't see or hear always. It's a perspective that matters. But institutions for you have been very important. Why do they matter? Why do strong institutions matter? And how do we build strong institutions?
Yeah, that task force was a tough job. And it was Wayne's predecessor that made the first call before the Prime Minister. And, if you do believe in the public interest in serving the public, you say yes when you're asked, subject to caveats on that occasion. Either you don't have the skill set and the time is just overwhelming, and that was my first answer on that occasion. I don't have the skill set. I have not had any exposure to criminal law, investigation, etc. And secondly, I'm managing a modest university, and I don't think this can be done on weekends. Nevertheless, we did it. But the notion of public service has been a very key concept. And again, my spiritual beliefs are that you're put on the earth to serve, and you do when asked. The institutions are very important. We have a book coming out in October on trust in public institutions, trust in leadership, trust in our organizations, where you find trust in information news, how you move from data to information to knowledge and wisdom, and where you go for that, where you find that. And for me, institutions like the Canadian Club of Toronto, like our democratic system, like our unusual constitutional monarchy with lieutenant governors and commissioners and governor generals, that's all part of a system that is trying to create an opportunity where people can grow to their maximum talents and where they can truly have equality of opportunity, fairness, and excellence too. And so I'm on a 1-year leave of absence from my law firm now for 54 or 55 years. I guess I'll have to go to work. Prem, I'll have to go to work at some point in time. Duncan, I'll have to go to work at some point in time, right there. But I believe in the power of institutions, and good institutions create trust, and trust create a sense of purpose and a sense of cohesiveness in communities where individuals and families can actually prosper. And that's the basic premise of Canada. And the other thing I would say is that as trust comes in on foot and goes out on horseback, or as Mark Carney puts it in a modern version, trust comes in on foot and goes out in a Ferrari. It's a very slow and steady to build and quick to destroy. And so institutions properly governed do that well. And for me, the university as an institution has been such a precious one. So I began managing in a university context at a young age at 32 as a dean and then as a university president at one university. And then for 5 years, I was a free man again. I was a professor of law in the Center for Medicine, Ethics, and Law at McGill. I taught law all the time I was president there, but now I was full-time. And I worked hard. I wrote 7 books in 5 years, which is a fair number. And at the end of that 5 years, I said, you know, those are good books and they're useful, but 10 years from now, nobody will read them, nor should they. They are a statement in time. And what I really enjoy doing is building institutions, building strong teams, and going into an institution, and no matter how good it is, say when you come out at the other end, it will be stronger and stronger in its fundamental values. And so I got back into being a general manager of a university for another 11 or 12 years with my extraordinary friends at the University of Waterloo. And then I guess I'd probably be doing that kind of thing if I weren't asked by someone in Wayne's position and the Prime Minister to come and spend 7 wonderful years serving a public institution, which is this unique form of government, a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary democracy. And I'll say a word on that.
You do that.
I will do that.
Yeah, I was about to say a word, but you go ahead.
Is that allowed?
Yeah, enough about you.
You're not going to cut me off?
Yeah.
Not this time? You know, people often ask me, don't you have somewhat of an archaic form of government in Canada? And I was at the 50th reunion of my American college graduating class, and they asked me to speak on public policy in Northern View. And 3 sentences into me describing what I did, they say, we thought we got rid of that in 1789, and for the better. But, you know, I said, if you look around the world today, and you want to identify 8 or 10 countries where by and large their citizenry is satisfied that their public institutions meet at least basic needs and with any luck help people to flourish, help the next generation to become better than the current generation. And where parliament democracy really does flourish, you'd probably name Denmark, Norway, Sweden, the United Kingdom, put Brexit aside for a moment, the Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. What's common to all of those? They're all constitutional monarchies with flourishing parliamentary democracies. And the parliamentary democracies tend to be focused on the short term and the business of government. And the constitutional monarchy focuses on the longer term, the stability, the fundamental values, the protection of the Constitution, and the dignity and the respect and the integrity of the people. And so our form of government is not perfect. Our public institutions are not perfect. In the trust book, we write about some of the challenges, but it's a pretty good base to make it better.
I was just thinking when you were talking about that, both at McGill and at Waterloo, you truly love the institution and the way that you love your family. You really love them in a very profound way. But when you came to McGill in '79, McGill was in a really tough place by the time you left in whenever it was, '95. It was in a much better place. But what are the 2 or 3 things that you focused on in both universities to make sure the institution was as strong as you felt it needed to be?
Well, number one, we were pretty young, and you and your 4 sisters were aged 3 to 11, and we didn't have to quite under the law, but Ron, you would remember well, Jillian, you remember well, our family, neighbors of yours. The kids all went into French-speaking schools. We had a difficult time finding a school for them initially because no one wanted to take 11-year-old and 9-year-old that didn't speak any French. And Allie, you and Debbie, your eldest daughter, failed her first year, and we thought, what have we done as parents? In London, Ontario, your biggest problem was there weren't enough days in the week to go to all the birthday parties you were invited to, and here you went through a whole year.
We were not invited to birthday parties in Montreal for a long time, at least a couple of years.
Never invited to another classmate's home because they didn't speak the language. And what have we done? But Sharon worked with the kids, and the second year was fine, and the third year there's flying, and they became global citizens. So They speak numbers of languages, and they've been in different parts of the world. Allie was in China for 2 years and a bit learning Mandarin. Debbie was in China, on and on and on. So that was a very interesting family experience of moving into a challenging environment, but family holding together. The second thing was we were surrounded by great people. We were surrounded by love. The McGill community that brought this young couple and this young family to come into the university in 1979 when all the English traffic was going this way and going out was a challenge. And I guess we learned even more the reliance on other people. There's no I in the word team. Team concepts make a difference. And the real challenge was not the university, where the spirit was so strong, although it had been battered, and there was a little bit of a siege mentality, because a public university with a government that was hostile was not fun, and the atmosphere was not fun. But that solidarity, that aspiration for excellence was there, and then we just had to deal with the political situation and manage what you could as well as you can, and what you couldn't manage, just control and see through. And guess what? McGill became stronger and stronger from a research point of view. Toronto Friends, University of Toronto Friends, are absolutely wonderful, but on a per capita basis, it's by far the leading research university in the country. And it's that tradition of excellence lived on. And just one little story of what you do when you're managing systems of that kind. Prior to that time, prior to the 70s, when McGill had a chair to fill, organic chemistry or anthropology, the dean would say, give me the list of the 3 best teacher scholars in the country in this area of organic chemistry, 1, 2, 3. And we can offer to the first one, don't get the first, the second, don't get the second, get the third. You'd get one of those 3 people 90% of the time. That was the draw of McGill. From about 1975 on, that was out of the window. You could not attract other families like ours coming down the highway into Quebec. So what we did was, we said we will not fill positions in 1 year. If you cannot fill this organic chemistry chair in this year, it'll be held over for another year, and we will not take it away from you, no matter what the budget is. Number 2, we will give you additional amounts of money to bring in visiting scholars internationally. So go around the world and find that best organic chemist or the second best, and then bring them here for a trial period and take 2 years or so to do it. Guess what happened? Many international people weren't particularly worried about the political future of Quebec. They were interested in a really strong university with a strong effort for excellence. And not only did the international, multicultural, pluralistic approach of McGill to the world broaden dramatically, but the quality of excellence, which was already good, went a notch up. Now that was kind of a positive story. There are lots of other more challenging ones, but it's how that marvelous university just gave us 15 wonderful years, and I think for you kids, a pretty interesting way to grow up.
Agree with that. I feel like you love your family more, but you love your country as much as you love anything. I see you express gratitude for what Canada has given to you and Mom, to little kids from Sault Ste. Marie, and lots of different opportunities opened up to you on the basis of community, on the basis of mentors and people reaching in and helping you fulfill your potential. You, in the last few years, have written 3 books. You're in the process of writing the 3rd, one on the idea of Canada, one on innovation, and now you've done a children's version, which is great, and my 3 kids who are here love. And you're writing one on trust. Why are these topics that you wanted to bring to the country, and why do you think they matter?
Well, very simple. I actually find writing hard. My wife gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and she writes till about 11:30, and then she goes and rides her horse, and then she begins her day at 1 o'clock, and all is well. She actually enjoys it. I find it hard, and I think this is book 35 or 36 or 37, and every time I finish, I say, I'll never do that again. Fortunately, I get a lot of help to write these days, and you just couldn't do it.
I'm actually his ghostwriter. I'm writing the book.
Wrote one co-authored with your elder sister on cyber law, Debbie, which is good fun. But I do so because the last 3 books really have to do with pretty fundamental values for the country. A country I love, a country that's a good country, and you always want to make it better. That's innovation. And so in the idea of Canada, we were telling stories, letters, and you know a thing or two about receiving letters from your father, to try to capture essences of the fundamental values that are important for us as a country and as we take the long-term view of how to have equality of opportunity and excellence too as mutually reinforcing objectives and not mutually destructive actions, and how do you make diversity work as a plus, being creative and innovative, coming from different points of view and not allow it to drive you apart. The second book we wrote, Tom Jenkins and I did a book on innovation and then the children's edition, and we did it because we're really worried about complacency. We're really worried about the country taking so much for granted, both our public institutions, our civilized values, but also our prosperity and our need to be very competitive in a very competitive world. And when life is comfortable in this country, and it's not comfortable in Singapore or South Korea or Israel or Finland, you can kind of just coast on your oars a little bit. You don't need that. Bill Tatum knows a thing or two about this, of constantly saying, we can do this better, and we'll do it better. And how do you develop that? So we said, let's tell some stories. Canada has great innovators. Let's collect stories of 50 innovators who've done great things and put them in a book. And guess what? We found that there were a whole lot more than 50. So we said, do 150 for 150th year. And guess what? There were a whole lot more. When we got to 297, the publisher said, that's all you can have in this book. So we stopped there, but we created a website, CanadianInnovationSpace.ca, to collect the stories we missed and to add to the ones that we didn't miss. And then we did a children's edition to make these things so that kids could appreciate them. And then through a cooperation program with Nipissing's Faculty of Education and two great professors, student interns produced 1,000 lesson plans for K through 12. So Georgia School can take Alexander Graham Bell's telephone and with a lesson plan, put legs on it. So we watched some 9-year-olds with one of these lesson plans, and one project in groups of 3 was, in 1890, you're running the store that is selling Alexander Graham Bell's telephone. Write the commercial advertisement as to why you need a telephone in your home or you and your business. And then another group of 9-year-olds, 3 of them in each, would write the owner's manual to explain what happens with this thing when you pick up the receiver and say, hello operator there. Wonderful to see children learning innovation. But innovation is very simple. It's simply doing things better, looking at another way of doing things better. It's not the brilliant new patent or invention. It's doing things better. And the book on trust is really that fundamental quality of trust, of confidence, of respect and love for one's neighbor, and the fragile qualities of trust, as some of our civilized principles are under some threat. Other parts of the world, but also in our country. And to remind ourselves of those fundamental values and how you build trust in leadership, in individuals, in communities, in institutions, and so on.
So on trust, I saw the draft a couple months ago, and what I loved is you actually create a list of the key elements that help build trust. And I don't want to give away the punchline because I want you to buy the book. But what are a few of the things that really go into building trust in people, building trust in institutions?
Well, there are 20 of them that we try to capture as kind of a maxim. And you know, one is doing the right thing, not just the thing right. Just ponder on that for a little bit of a moment. Another is not simply the letter of the law, the spirit of the law. Another is lead by example, not what you say. Another is to thine own self be true, and it shall follow as the night the day, that then thou canst be false to anyone. Interesting passage from Hamlet. Hamlet's people that played the fool often had the wisest things to say in his play, and that's Polonius to his son who's leading Denmark for university in Germany, and that's the advice he gives him: to thine own self be true, and it shall follow as the night the day, that then thou canst be false to anyone. And what is it you're true to in yourself? Well, you're true to those fundamental values, and you asked me the very first question, and that my response was, what are your fundamental values?
So we've got 5 minutes, so we're going to do 3 quick questions. I want you to quickly talk about what Canada can represent to the world in making the world a better place. Then I want you to answer whether the Queen makes jokes. And then, so you can sequence your thought process, you're going to end on what is the role of hockey in your life, which is a
What is the role
of hockey in your life, which is a good question to end on.
Yeah, I should work backwards. Well, let's work backwards. I love the game of hockey. But I grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, where you learn to skate before you learn to walk, and that's almost literally true. But you know, in a community like that, you played every sport imaginable. And I had part-time jobs from age 9 on, and I never missed a sport. I never missed a class. I was a good student. It was a great community. And I come from very modest circumstances, but that was a big thing. And then at one point I thought of a professional career in hockey, and probably a good thing I didn't. I graduated from college. I was a 150-pound defenseman, and Boston Bruins was in those days you didn't have a draft. It was a neighboring team, and it probably would not have been a great life. I would have gone to the farm team, Providence Red, and be going to night law school and so on. I had a scholarship to Cambridge and took that, and that was good. But the game of hockey is great for me, and one of the things that concerns me a lot is violence in hockey and concussions. So with other great people like Ken Dryden, we've been on a bit of crusade to try to make the game safer for Georgia and her siblings. I want my grandchildren to play that game and love it as I did, and we can make it a whole lot safer. Enough about hockey for the moment.
Does the Queen make jokes?
Yeah, the Queen's actually very funny, and you're never supposed to talk about that. You're also not supposed to catch her by the elbow.
You only make that mistake once.
You know, only the British tabloids, they have such a cult about that. But as I did that, when the carpet was a little slippy at Canada House, I thought, if I don't grab her elbow, my mother is going to reach down from heaven and slap me on the ear. Queen is really, actually very funny, and her husband is very funny in a different way. And if we had more time, I'd tell you about wonderful stories with them, including your mom wearing her shoes for a weekend when we were at Balmoral, because we came with only formal stuff, and the Queen and Sharon spent most of the time in the stable, and so she wore the Queen's shoes, which was kind of a lot of fun. First question.
First question is your view of Canada's potential role in the world and making the world a better place.
Well, this is a marvelous country, and it's a social innovation itself. It's an innovation based on the premise that diversity can work for you, not against you. And Chancellor Merkel was with us 3 or 4 years ago. One of the great privileges is you meet these marvelous people, and she's a research chemist, so she was cross-examining me on how do you make this crazy quilt of heterogeneity work. And I was questioning her on whether the European Union, that a Nobel Peace Prize for keeping peace for 60 years, how do you continue it? And we were both respectful of one another, but we were cross-examining, as you would, and I'd have 5 minutes and she would. And so when she asked me that question, Stephen, I think you kept 10 copies of Why Nations Fail in your office. I think you went and got a copy of the book, which I gave her. It's a book by Darren Acemoglu of MIT and James Robinson of Harvard, but it's a Canadian Institute for Advanced Research project. You know a bit about that, Paul. And its basic premise is those societies that are inclusive in their economics and politics are in an upward spiral, and those that are extractive in their economics and politics are in a downward spiral. Notice not inclusive and exclusive. She picked up on that. She says it's not a 180-degree opposite. Extractive, funny words. So she broke into German for 3 or 4 minutes, and in that period of time, she and her ministers came up with 17 synonyms for extractive, kind of ugly features of it. But for me, this is why this nation is not failing. It's inclusive in its economics and politics. And the social innovation is that you can actually build a society based on diversity, not hunkering around very common values and tight associations, but broad associations where you do have a respect for the other, and the other can contribute a part of that matrix, but it's fragile. You have to work at it all the time in all the way you can. And that's what I hope Canada, without being non-Canadian and bragging, can show that we can make this work. We can make diversity work for us. We can ensure that we have equality of opportunity and excellence too. We can assure our children that their life will be better than ours. And as Ian, where's the Waterloo group that you had, Tech for Good, Ian Klugman? 10 days ago in Waterloo, a conference based on tech, which said the moral values of tech. Like Adam Smith's real book was The Moral Imperative. It wasn't Wealth of Nations. How you can make tech work for good. That's the Canada that I want to show to the world, and that we can be a peaceful, peace-creating, cooperative nation and not one that is bellicose.
So I will end by saying you're lucky you were a good father, because this conversation could have gone very differently. I love you very much, and I'm very proud of you because you're such a wonderful person.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And these were over? I can leave?
You want to talk?
No. I don't think I can think of a better recipient of the 2017 Lifetime Achievement Award your compassion for this country, the things that you have done both in education and in public office, or not necessarily in public office, but as Governor General, and just your values that you bring to everyday life are certainly very admirable. And I'm sure everyone in the room would agree with me that it's just a marvelous, marvelous impact that you've had on our society and on Canada as a better country for the future. So if you come up and we can give you this wonderful award because you're an outstanding recipient. Thank you. We'll get a photo. We'll get a photo. For one more second. Just to say thank you, Alex, for your wonderful interview style. I think a father-daughter is a wonderful way to do an interview, and it was very personal, and it felt very heartfelt, and it was very meaningful, I'm sure, for all of us. So you did a great job. Thank you to Alex as well. So thank you all for coming to this event today. It feels like a very special event. And before I conclude, I just want to encourage everyone to come to upcoming events. Next year will be a new season, and we'll have some wonderful events coming. So please, if you're not familiar with the Canadian Club, you can go on our website, because I really think we do bring issues of the day to our podium, and there's a big commitment to continue the 100-plus year tradition of the Canadian Club and have speakers of the caliber that we've had today. I would also like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming of today's event. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors one last time for their generous support of these events: Deloitte, Fairfax Financial Holdings, McCarthy Tétrault, the University of Waterloo. So thank you. The meeting is now adjourned. Have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you again for coming.